Welcome. My name is Cedric, and I'm here with Anime Gamer Zone, bringing you an exclusive interview with the one and only beautiful Miss Brina Palencia. Miss Palencia, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us, obviously.
Of course. Yeah, my
Yeah.
pleasure.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Miss Palencia here has a very extensive resume, and if we went through every single role that she's gone through, then we'd be here all day. But, Miss Palencia, would you do the honors of introducing yourself and maybe some of your roles a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I've been voice acting for I think 21 years now, which is really exciting. These days I'm mostly known for Tony Chopper in One Piece. I was also CL Phantom Hive in Black Butler, Holo and Spice and Wolf. I play Mineta in My Hero Academia. I play Mad Moxie in Borderlands. I also have done a lot of music adaptation for Funimation and Crunchyroll titles, and I've done some music stuff on my own. Yeah, I think that's the general gist.
So I do want to ask, because I was doing my homework on you a little bit, and I saw when you were going to college, you were a big fan of Dragon Ball, and
Oh,
that's
in
kind
high
of
school, actually, when I was
in
in high
high school
school,
too. Okay,
huge fan. Yeah.
yeah, and I wanted to ask because how did it feel to eventually be able to join the permanent cast, both in the video games and being able to be Chaozu and Poir later in the later adaptations of Dragon Ball?
It was pretty surreal because I had actually taken a tour of Funimation whenever I was still in high school. And I remember it was Chris Sabat who was recording, and we got to watch him record Piccolo. And I remember watching it and just thinking, like, I think I could do that. I want to do that. And so, yeah, then fast forward to when Dragon Ball Kai came around, and Chris Sabat actually asked me to assistant direct for him on that. And like, especially when we got to the Cell Saga, that was like my favorite arc in Dragon Ball Z, and just sort of like seeing all the things and remembering all the things. It was wild. I kind of had to take a step back and be like, man, if my 15-year-old self could see me now, I think she'd be pretty proud. So yeah, is pretty cool. And then getting to do I was the music director um, for Dragon Ball Super for those ending theme songs, and that was so much fun. That honestly is probably my favorite thing that I've done in the Dragon Ball world. Voicing Chiaotzu and Poir is fun, but they don't really say much. So it was really cool getting to learn those songs and then do the lyric adaptation and then find the singers for it, and it was just a really cool, fun experience.
Yeah, I understand. I believe in college you were majoring more in something like music or production related, and
It was
then
music,
it
yes,
was
yes. I
music.
got
Yeah.
a Bachelor of Arts in Music. Yeah.
Mhm. So how was that like when you were seeing them voice acting? Think you could do it yourself? Was this one of those things where it just shifted, or it's like, oh, I could do both at the same time? Like, what was like the planned
Yeah,
path,
I
I
mean,
guess, to this direction?
yeah, I had started voice acting um, while I was in college. So when I was 18 is when I started. And I did very small parts for about 2 years. So it wasn't until I was around 20 that I actually got my first featured character, which was Nina Tucker in Full Metal Alchemist. Um, and I just did both at the same time. I didn't really, I've never been the kind of person who had a plan for my life. Have a lot of friends that, they have their 5-year plan, their 10-year plan, their 15-year plan. And uh, like none of them actually came to fruition for any of my friends. So I remember feeling like I was sort of like a messed up person that I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I guess I'm doing it wrong. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. But I feel like I turned out okay. And not that my friends who had the plan didn't turn out okay, but like none of their plans actually ended up the way they wanted it to. So I'm kind of like, oh, I guess that's just kind of not necessary. So yeah, I I'm one of those people. I'm incapable of doing anything that I am not really passionate about, and acting and music have always been things that interest me. And so I just prioritized those things and then did my best to try to pay the bills. I worked at a dry cleaner, several dry cleaners. No, just two different dry cleaners, and I also did like ticket sales for the Dallas Symphony Orchestra. But yeah, I just did whatever I could to pay the bills. I essentially saw like I just saw both of them as a hobby, but they were my main focus. And as long as I could pay my bills, everything else just sort of I thought would fall in line. Like I never had any idea that it would end up being something that did pay my bills. I always thought of it as something that I would save up money to do and then do it and then go back to like my minimum wage job and then, whatever. I just ended up being very lucky that I was in the right place in the right time, got in when I did, and it's now a career. It's kind of wild.
Well, I think in general too with creative outlets, I feel like a lot of people end up kind of starting like that, even myself included. And for in terms of like 5 year plans and stuff, like who knew like 5 years ago that we're gonna have to stay inside for like a whole year, 2 years,
Yeah,
too. So it's
exactly.
like
Yeah.
anything can really happen that can like
Yeah.
totally mess up like a long term plan like that. But speaking of like long term things, I know we were talking about the smaller voice actor roles in the beginning, but going to like say something like Tony Chopper, was that when you or anyone else were auditioning for those roles, did you expect that to be a 20+ year commitment when you were starting out with that?
I mean, we knew it was a big deal and we knew it was a long running show, but I don't think any of us had any idea it would be to where it is now. Because there were a lot of times that it would kind of lose popularity and then it was a question of whether or not we would even still dub it. And so it was always kind of a roller coaster with that. So it's been wild seeing how popular it has suddenly become. I guess I say suddenly, it's 20 years in the making, but but it feels like it's out of nowhere for those of us who have been working on it forever. Um, and yeah, I don't think any of us predicted that it would ever get to the level that it is ever. I don't think we could have even fathomed it at that point.
Right. Well, I think also in general too that anime has gotten a very sudden surge of
Yes,
popularity. I'd
I
say,
was going to say that
especially.
too. I don't think any of us ever fathomed that anime would be as mainstream as it is now. Um, that's been a huge surprise as well.
So I did want to ask too because I know you have a lot of different acting experience. You have stuff in the video games, you have dubbing in anime, and you were even in The Walking Dead for a little bit as well, from what I
I was, yeah.
remember. Yeah.
Hmm.
I wanted to ask because a lot of actors I've talked to in general say that dubbing is one of the most difficult forms because you're constrained to what the characters' mouths are moving. But what do you feel with all of your experience? What do you feel is the most difficult like form of acting?
I mean, they're all difficult in different ways. Dubbing is the most difficult to make sound natural because you don't get to dictate what the rhythm or cadence of it is because it's, already animated and you're restrained to the time that is already there. But not only that, you're constrained by the internal flaps. So it's not the flaps are what we call the mouth movements. So like it's not just like start to finish. You also have to like if they do a big thing, you have to like do that too. So there's so much of it that is already chosen for you. So it's the most difficult to sort of make your own and to actually sound as if it were animated for you. That's the goal is to try to sound like you created like you are saying this off the cuff that anytime that you can watch a dub and it feels almost like it was improvised, then that's a good dub. Like they did a good job, that it feels as if it were meant to be in that language. But it is incredibly hard to do and near impossible to do for live action dubs, in my opinion.
Do you feel? How about for like say in the video games or live action? What would you say is the most difficult parts about those aspects? Would you say?
For the video game world, um, probably the screaming is the hardest. There's a lot. I feel like a lot of video games tend to have a lot of fighting. But I don't know. Video games feel pretty easy to me. Like, not to like act like I'm some incredible video game voice actor or whatever, but in my experience, they tend to be pretty chill. My favorite form of acting is doing the mocap for video games. So getting to, wear the suit and embody the character, so that not only is your vocal performance captured, but your physical performance is also captured and then reskinned with the character. Um, that has always been the most gratifying to me because it's all the things that I love about voice acting where you're not restricted by how you look per se. You can kind of be anyone, but at the same time, you still get to fully embody the character and you get to act with other people. Because with dubbing, you don't get to act with other people. And a lot of times, even with, I like with video games, if you're not doing the mocap, if you're just doing the voice acting, you're also just isolated in a booth, in my experience. So getting to do scenes with people is always ideal. And then for on camera, actual film and TV, it's just, keeping up the physical appearance, honestly, is pretty exhausting. Like, it's just trying to, like, uh, it's hard to not just start hating your body, because you are so restricted by it, but also there's just so much expectation, particularly for women, and I don't wanna discount what dudes have to go through too. There's a lot in that too, as far as, like, if you wanna be an action hero, the level that they got to get to is pretty intense. And then for women, it's just in general, all of them. You just always have to look a specific way. Um, and then like, but beyond that, it can be really fun. But yeah, there's so much going on whenever you're on a set for on camera that can be so distracting because there's just so many people that are on set, particularly for TV. Because I did The Walking Dead, and then I also was really lucky. I got to be a series regular on a show called Starcross that was on the CW. Um, so yeah, filmed in New Orleans for like 6 months, and it was a very unique and unexpected experience. And yeah, there's just a ton of people on set all the time. There's so many things to look at and so many things you have to think of as far as hitting your mark or else the take is blown. And then especially if there's like cars involved or any sort of vehicle, it's like the level that they have to reset everything. Like, oh, we got to move the tank back. Like, oh, you flubbed your line, you screwed it up. Okay, well, I guess we got to get everybody back to one. So there's like a lot more pressure. Um, and because you can see how much everything costs, you know what I mean? You're like doing the math in your head of like, oh my God, all of these people cost so much money. So yeah, there's I think on camera for film and TV has the most outward pressure, both just as far as how you look and if you're wasting everyone's time, like it's really hard not to get in your own head and not get really depressed when you're doing on camera. But yeah, for video games and like anime, there's some of that. I mean, there's that in any type of media where you're exposed to and where people get to judge you constantly. Acting is just hard, period, for that fact. But there's less of it. When you're voice acting, you're just isolated in a booth, or whenever you're on set for mocap, there's not nearly as many people. Like I think the most people I've ever seen on set for mocap for myself has been like maybe 10. Um, but yeah, whereas for a film, it's like it could be like 100 people. Like it's just insane how many
Yeah,
people.
I can imagine for like voice acting, it's just like you get a message. Can you do another take of this? It's a little
Yeah,
bit
it's so fast. Like if
like
you
very less pressure.
and you
I
and
can
you also
imagine.
don't unless you're doing mocap, you're not memorizing the line. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to memorize anything. You're looking at it for the first time ever, which I think for some people could be really intimidating and scary that you're not able to look at your script ahead of time. But yeah, I've done it long enough now that that doesn't scare me at all. Um, but yeah, a lot less pressure overall, I think.
I do want to go back to dubbing a little bit because let me see how to phrase this question. Because I know for like a regular voice acting audition for like say an original character, like you'll get like the picture of the character, maybe a description, and the directors may say something like, "Okay, what kind of voice do you think will go with this character?" Or maybe you'll get kind of some kind of direction, right? But a character like Chopper, Ikue Otane, Pikachu herself over in Japan, So like, did you feel like when you were auditioning for Chopper, was there a lot of freedom, like choosing what kind of voice to do, or were you kind of, or was there kind of like an expectation already going into that character?
With Chopper specifically, there was a lot more expectation going into the character. Um, they so typically whenever you do an anime audition, it is the same where you get the picture of the character, the description of the character, and then like a few lines that you have to read. Um, and for One Piece, it was totally different because you had all of that, but then also when you went into audition, they showed you the scene in Japanese first. And then you had to kind of, you didn't need to match it exactly, but it was like, okay, this is what we're going for, generally speaking. So do your best version of that and try to make it your own. And we also had to do several rounds of auditions. I think we did 3 rounds, maybe more. And that's also not typical of uh, anime auditions. Usually it's like you audition the one time and then you either book it or you don't. Um, Whereas with One Piece, they had us do a few rounds and then they narrowed it down to, I think, 5 people. And then from there, um, it was uh, chosen by the creator. Like he actually chose who got what part from the 5 that were picked by the director, Mike McFarland.
For any of those dubbing roles, was there any ones that were like, we're not going to listen to the Japanese that much, just do whatever you want, like whatever you see, kind of thing, or is there
Um,
always kind of a relation to the original version as well?
I mean, there's always a relation to the original version in the sense that we always preview it first. So we always see it in Japanese. So no matter what, it's always going to color what we do. I don't think I've never like actively gone against what I have seen the Japanese say you do. Um, because I always want to respect what the original creator wanted. And I assume that, if it made it to print with the Japanese version, that that's kind of the same feel that you're going for. The only time that I remember really actively finding influences outside of the Japanese was for Holo and Spice and Wolf, and not because of anything against the Japanese version at all. It was just something that hit me when we were recording. Was with Jamie Markey, actually. She directed those first few episodes, and I can't remember if I was just doing it as a joke or something. In between takes, I was doing a Katharine Hepburn impression because there was just something about the way Holo carried herself that reminded me of Katharine Hepburn. And Jamie was like, "Do that. Let that color your performance." And it's not that I do a cat like my actual Katharine Hepburn impression for Holo, but it does, like when I would preview it and practice it as we were watching it, I would do full on Katharine Hepburn, and then I would do Holo. Like I would kind of I did let that color the character and the way that she spoke and her cadence um, with all the lines. But yeah, I think that's the only time that I remember actively thinking of someone other than the Japanese Seiyu.
Okay, thank you. And now, let's see, for anime as well. Like, obviously, there's really popular characters like Holo and Chopper, for example. But then, there's not so very popular characters too. And I know that you voice one of them, which is Mineta from My Hero Academia. That's a character that's quite controversial in that
Very
space.
well hated, yeah.
Obviously, yeah. I want to know if there's any way you yourself deal with like hate, because I know a lot of character dislike can get misdirected to other avenues. So I wanted to see how your personal feelings on it were.
Yes. Well, first I want to say thank you to the fan base for not giving your hatred to me personally. I've never experienced that. In general, I have felt it's very much specific to Mineta and not me directly, which is lovely. Thank you for making that differentiation. Uh, I have like a whole TED talk that I could give on what I think with Mineta. I'll try to keep it brief. But I want to remind everyone that Mineta is a child. He literally has not gone through puberty because I am voicing him. That is why I am voicing him. He has not gone through puberty. So I think it is unfair to hold him to the same standard that we would an adult male. In order for someone to be a predator, they have to have power. Mineta has no power. He's an idiot and he's rude, and he absolutely needs to be put in his place, and he is by his classmates, and I applaud them for that. They need to continue to do that and continue to teach him how to human, because he obviously needs help. I don't think that he is an evil, disgusting predator. Again, because he has no power. And again, he's going through puberty. Like, sex is weird. Sex is awkward. And I know for myself and all of my other adult friends, we have talked about this a lot. You think and do some really weird stuff when you're going through puberty. And there's just, you got little horny little feelings, and that's okay. And that's totally natural. And it scares me a little bit whenever I see much younger kids hating so vehemently against Mineta, because it makes me worry that they're thinking those things about themselves. And I hope that that is not the case. It is okay to have perverted thoughts. That's totally fine. It's not okay to touch people without their permission. It's not okay to, push boundaries in that regard. That's never okay. But it is totally okay to think those things, and completely natural. And there's nothing wrong with you if you are thinking those things. And if you like boobs, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. So yeah, I hope that people start to give him a little more grace. I think there is definitely a little bit of a double standard whenever you have a show where there's an actual teacher who is using her sexuality to control young boys. I think that I don't know why that's not pointed out more and harped on more, because I think that's a predator, because she does have power over them. But I don't write it, so.
Yeah, honestly, like I'd be very pressed to find someone that would look back on high school and be like, oh yeah, I was perfect in high school, like absolutely nothing wrong, awkward,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's a very important thing to consider too, I'd say.
Yeah, because he shouldn't be a role model. He's not a role model of who you should be, but also he's probably the most real of all of them. Like he's like I feel like he is imperfect in many ways, and it makes me sad that that's not that a kid is not allowed to be imperfect that way. He should be allowed to be imperfect. And again, not condoning touching anyone against their will. Like, that's never ever 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 okay, and you should absolutely get slapped in the face for that. But yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I did not expect such a deep talk about that with a character like Mineta, but
Yeah.
thank you.
No, I think I make a lot of
Insight.
people. I think I make a lot of people really uncomfortable because I go there with him. But I think about it, like I'm a mom. Like I think about my kid. Like, I don't want him, whenever he goes through puberty, to have this self hatred just because he has sexual thoughts. Like, that's totally normal and okay. It's okay.
Okay, we're gonna change over a little bit. For those of you that don't know, Miss Palencia here is also an incredibly talented singer. She did a cover of Top Musica in Spanish, and I understand you were deeply moved by what was happening with your family and the election in Honduras. Do you mind diving deeper into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you for that question. So I was lucky enough to get asked to do the English translation for Ado's music, for the subtitles. They wanted the subtitles to be able to sing as though they're lyrics, and so they asked me to essentially just write English lyrics for all of the songs. And Top Musica in particular really moved me, and was really meaningful to me. Corazón errante, la lluvia comienza, mis lágrimas fluyen, nunca se detienen. And it just, like you said, it did remind me a lot of there was a point in Honduras where there was a corrupt party that they weren't able to get out of power. And so the way that the elections work in Honduras, it's very different than here. Each position is voted on. It's not just the president and then the president picks everybody. It's the president, it's the the Secretary of State. It's the like all of the different things are voted on, and so in order to uh, try to get this corrupt party out, um, all of the other political parties, because there are multiple political parties in Honduras, there's not just two, all of the other political parties joined together, and rather than them each having a person up for each seat, so multiple parties having multiple people up for each seat, they each chose a position, and then that party ran just that position. So that way there was only like one other person on the ballot. And because of that, they were able to, even with how corrupt the elections are there, they were able to win by such an extreme level that they were able to finally get the corrupt party out. And Top Musica reminded me of it because there's the, uh, like, in the chorus, it talks about like, it's essentially saying like let's all sing together, and then through this we can stop all of this, uh, like all of this pain, all of this torment. And I don't know, I just thought it would be really cool to do a cover of it in Spanish just to honor that side of me. I'm half Honduran, and I have a lot of family that still live there, and were giving me play-by-plays of the whole election as it was happening. And yeah, I just thought it was such a cool, powerful, meaningful song. Because the other thing too is whenever I was adapting the lyrics, I didn't know I didn't know the movie. Like I knew what movie it was for, but I didn't know the story of the movie. So I had to like make up my own story in my head for each song just to kind of like get into it and kind of, yeah. So for me, the story that I put in my head for that song was, uh getting rid of a corrupt power through the unity of music.
Yeah, that's a great story though, and that version, that Spanish version of Top Musica is doing pretty well. Lots of streams on both Spotify and views on YouTube as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's not
There
too
seems to
bad.
be a market for this kind of thing too, like
Well,
Spanish
what I thought
does.
was funny too, some of the comments that are in Spanish were like, "Why are there so many English speakers on here?" And I like explained to one of them, I was like, "Oh, in Spanish, I was like typing, I was like, I'm a voice actor in English, and that's how I have my fan base. So it's a bunch of people who speak English who are watching it. But also thank you for watching it." But yeah, so I think there are a lot of Spanish speakers that just happen to come across it not knowing who I am, because I don't do Spanish dubs. And so they're just like, why are there so many English speakers interested in this Spanish version?
Because I know you mentioned that, and in that tweet too, you said you don't typically like do Spanish dub versions, but there seemed to be some kind of demand for it. So in the future, ¿quieres cantar más músicas en español or es solo para
Sí, sí, claro.
solo para un?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, for sure. It does take me way longer to do it in Spanish than it does in English. But yeah, I really would like to. Because like you said, it was like that has way more views and way more listens than anything else that I've ever posted. So I was like, oh, I guess maybe this is my market.
Yeah, I know. Because I know you lived in Honduras for a little bit, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I lived there till I was 4, and then I went to school there. I went back in 5th grade, and I went to school there in 5th grade. And I spent most of my summers there growing up, in La Ceiba, in La Marisol, if there's anybody listening from La Ceiba.
But I have I make my own videos, and some of them I talk about like localization or making different versions of songs. And I know like the Latin American community definitely loves their versions of like Spanish Dragon Ball, like Spanish
Yeah,
Chala and stuff like that. So and, there could be some demand for like more Spanish versions of like more modern anime songs too, I feel.
I think so. I think the Latin American market in general is like not respected as much as they should be.
Mhm. Yeah, they have a lot of heart and passion. I've heard some of those covers. They're very
And
good.
it's huge. Latin America is freaking huge. Like, I don't get it.
Feel like a whole half of the continent basically, like to
Yeah.
yourselves and all those islands. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so we have a little segment here for I asked some of my viewers, potential questions they wanted to ask you. So we got three here if you're so open.
Yeah.
Let's see. So SB Senpai Manga from TikTok asks, out of all of the characters on your list, like who was your favorite character to voice in your opinion?
I have gotten to voice a lot of really cool characters. Chopper is definitely up there as far as just sentimental. I mean, I've gotten to live with that character for about 16 years. And that's just not a thing that gets to happen for most actors. And I just love how much he has grown. He's so freaking cute, but not only is he cute, he's brave and strong and smart. I'm just really proud of him. And then I also, Ciel Phantom Hive is always going to be one of my top faves just because he was one of the most technically difficult characters I've ever voiced. Um, and emotionally difficult. I mean, he just goes through so much. And Hollow's a big one. I mean, that was the one of my favorite shows to do with J. Michael Tatum, who's a dear friend of mine. And also, Gasai and Future Diary. I told someone recently that I distinctly remember when I got that role and recording that role that I could feel myself growing as an actor. I've I felt myself level up, you know, because she very much like Ciel goes through so much and has a lot of complicated feelings. And it was a joy to get to try to make sense of that in my own brain and try to embody that in the character.
Mhm. All right, and then I guess to follow up on that question too. So Diaz Vale 144 from Instagram wants to ask you if you had to pick a Straw Hat other than Tony Chopper, who would you say is your favorite in the Straw Hat crew?
Brooke. I love Brooke.
Brooke.
I love Brooke so much. He's so funny. And Ian does such a good job on his voice too. There are most of the time, if he's in my pre-roll, because we don't record together, but sometimes if he records before me, I'll have him in my pre-roll. Sometimes I have to have him muted because he makes me laugh. just just sitting there, like just his reactions of like like just the silly thing. He's so freaking funny. He's so funny. And I also just love his character design. I love skeletons. I love spooky stuff. And I love that he's a musician. So yeah, he's my favorite.
Gotta love the characters with the hats in in the crew. And then
Yeah, totally.
this one was kind of an out there question. I actually had to kind of like look things up when I got this question. So No Tricks of Morris 3318 wanted to ask if you could ask Jamie Lee Curtis to give us a shout out. So I won't obviously ask you to do that, but I looked up. Apparently, you guys are friends, and she even gave you a shout out at the Academy Awards one time. Something like
Yeah,
that.
that was wild. It's so funny because I never tell anyone that we're friends because I like to keep her life private, but I but she tells everyone that we're friends, which I love. She's incredible. She so her daughter was a huge One Piece fan, and Chopper was her favorite character. And so Jamie had reached out to my manager in LA to try to meet me, which I thought for sure was a joke. I was like, there's no way this is actually Jamie Lee Curtis. It's going to be some like dude in a wig. I don't know. Like, like I was like, there's no way that this is real. And so when I showed up for the lunch, it was actually her. And she was so sweet. We had a 3 hour lunch, and then we just have remained friends ever since then. She actually gives my son Christmas presents and birthday presents every year. And she writes really incredible children's books, and she gave him like her whole library and then wrote personalized notes in every single book. She's unbelievably generous and kind and sweet. Um, she's wonderful. Like she's as genuine as she seems when you see her interviews. Like she's truly that person. She's a freaking wonderful human.
Yeah, this is a very fun fact about her too. Is that she's a big fighting game fan as well, apparently. So she'll
Oh,
like
I
go
didn't know
to
that.
yeah. So there's like a big joke because at Evo, which is the biggest fighting game tournament of the years, like Jamie Lee Curtis will go in like disguise and just enjoy the fighting game tournaments too. So if that gives any kind of insight onto her personality beyond what you've given us, then I think
I
yeah,
totally believe
she,
that. Yeah.
yeah, she's a very fun person. Alrighty. So before we wrap up, I just have a couple more questions. But where can the viewers find, where like find out where you are going to be at like another con or what your next voice acting gig is or support your future endeavors?
Instagram is the only social media that I actually use. It's at Breenakins, Brinakins. You'll also see a lot of photos of my garden and my pets. But I try my best to remember that people also want to know about conventions and anime. So I'm getting a little bit better about posting about that stuff. But yeah, that's like the only place that I do anything.
Do you know the next con you're going to by chance?
I don't know the next con, but I know that I'm going to be doing a store signing at Arisu, Arisu, in Connecticut in December. Hmm.
That'll be fun for the Connecticut viewers, I'm sure. And okay,
Yeah,
this is
I don't think it'll be my first time in Connecticut.
oh, okay, gotcha.
Mhm.
All right, this question we can cut this out if you want to say no. I'll totally understand. But Spice and
Okay.
Wolf was one of my first animes that I ever watched in the dub. So if you want to flatter me a bit and give a little soundbite of Horo from Holo from Spice and Wolf, if you'd be so inclined, you can say no if you want, but it's up to
Oh
you.
yeah, no. What do you want me to say?
I don't know. It's been so long since I've seen the anime. I just remember seeing her
Do you want
and
me to do it
seeing
to
that she
you or for like anime gamer?
Anime Gamer Zone, or maybe you can tell everyone to subscribe to Anime Gamer Zone's channel, something like that. That would be fun.
I could do that.
Hmm.
Hello, everyone. This is Holo, the Wise Wolf. Remember, you should subscribe to Anime Gamer Zone. I hear they're wonderful.
Thank you so much for that, Miss Valencia. I don't have anything else, so I think we're done here, unless there was any last closing thoughts you had yourself by chance. But otherwise, we can start to wrap up here.
Yes, I actually would love to plug my podcast. It's called But I'm Spiritual. It's a comedy spiritual podcast. We try to hold a lot of reverence for spiritual practices, but we make fun of ourselves through the process. It's my friend Artist Campbell and I. We interview people about their spiritual experiences and what brought them to where they are now. And then we also talk a lot about ourselves and how we're learning different spiritual practices. She and I are both really into tarot, so we talk a lot about tarot. We also get into Vedic meditation and somatic experiencing and lots of stuff. We're learning about lots of stuff. But yeah, so it's a very lighthearted approach to spirituality because our thing is like there is no right way to do it, that everybody just kind of has to find what works for them. So it's a very judgment free zone.
All right, everyone, make sure to go check out that podcast. I know I will myself. Yeah, I think we're all good here. Thank you so much for your time, Miss
Thank you.
Valencia.